G'day folks, it's DIY Guy 123 here, bringing you another do-it-yourself video. Today I'm changing the transmission filter and fluid in a 2012 Mustang GT. It's got the 6-speed automatic. So Ford intends this to be a lifetime fluid and filter. They don't intend for you to change it, and they don't make it really easy. I haven't done the job before, but I've done a bit of reading and it seems like it's a doable thing. Certainly easier if you have a hoist. A couple of safety things, certainly when you're underneath the vehicle, take precautions about vehicles falling on you. But also something that is sort of unique with this job is you have to check the transmission fluid with the engine running and when everything is hot. Yeah, this is the catalytic converter. And right there is the dipstick and the place where you fill with fluid. So if you're adding fluid or checking, you're going to have your hand like this next to that. And apparently the heat radiated from like there. When I move my fingers like this, it causes my hand to move this way. And like, you're probably going to touch that. So gloves are a must. I'm actually going to take some heat tape that I have and wrap it just as a precaution, and we'll see if that, hopefully that prevents any major mishap. So, first things first, this vehicle has 112,000 kilometers on it. The transmission fluid and filter have never been changed to my knowledge. I really don't think they have. And so it's time to do it. In other vehicles I've always dropped the pan, changed the filter, to put the pan back on, topped it up with fluid, and then disconnected the return line from the oil cooler, from the transmission fluid cooler, disconnected the line where it goes into the transmission, and I've had someone start the car, they'd pump out a liter of oil, and then shut the car off, and I'd add a liter of oil. And we'd do this until the fluid that they pumped out was new color. Often you're changing an old transmission, dirty brown, and when they are pumping it out clean red, that means you have more or less flushed it. I'd say it's probably 80% as good as what a training shop would do for a flush. In this case, I've learned that these transmissions have a solenoid in them that doesn't circulate fluid through the whole system. Like there are parts of the system that fluid does not circulate through unless it's up to temperature. So it's more challenging to do what I described. And for today, I'm going to just drop the pan, drain the fluid, put the pan back, new filter, pan back up, put 6 or 7 liters in or whatever it takes to get to the full mark and call it good. Sometime down the road, I'll probably do it again. And then I'll probably not do it again for as long as I own the car because I won't put very many kilometers on it. So yeah, let's get started. First things first is there is the fill plug, and I'm curious to see what the level is with the engine, with the transmission cold and not running. I predict when I undo this plug and take the dipstick out, oil will come out. So I'll just prove that that's the case and then put it back down, and then I will start the car and check the fluid as well to see what the fluid level is cold when it's not running and cold while it's running. And just want to measure those details. Other videos and write-ups I've seen about it, people don't do that, and they're always kind of wondering, oh, well, I wonder what it was before I started, and why did I only have to put 6 quarts in and when I thought I would have had to put 5? And so I'm going to measure the before. So that's what we'll get started on. Okay, so I use compressed air to blow off everywhere around here, all the bolts, and especially the the fill level check port. Use the 19 mil wrench. I had a straight wrench, but that's not good enough. You need one with an angle here to get in on top of that check port. And I actually needed to double up my wrenches like this. Sorry, I know some of you don't like that, to crack that free. And as soon as I cracked it free, there's no friction or anything there. Sorry, you can't see, but I'm just gonna unscrew it. And I'm kind of waiting for fluid to pour out of there. I can hear air escaping, so it's a sealed transmission for sure. Oh my gosh, how are you ever gonna check that with the engine running? This is ridiculous, Ford, come on. Okay, so there's the cap. Right, well, fluid did not leak out, so I'm now going to check what's in there now, just as a point of interest. So I think you just have to hold your fingers the right way, I'm guessing, to get that in there. Right, and you snap it down and you pull it out. So I would guess it's right up to basically the bottom of the hole. So that level is just below the overflow. Okay, so that's question number 1 answered. When it's cold, without the engine running, oil does not flow out of the dipstick hole. So I'm going to put this back on, snug. I'm going to start it and measure the level cold. That's what I'm going to do while it's running. Before I start it, I'm going to wrap this with heat tape to hopefully prevent an accident where I need a skin graft. I think I am. Yeah, of course, that's good. That's got it all wrapped up all the way along there, and where my hand is gonna go, I'll be using my left hand, and I'll be able to lift the dipstick up higher than the hole to get it out, and hopefully I won't melt my glove. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see there, but I've checked it a couple of times and it's only showing about 3/4 of an inch up this dipstick. Maybe even like there's a word remove stick from cap before use right there. Maybe even the REM in remove are the only ones with fluid on them. Probably hard to see now. My heat tape idea worked so far, so good, but it's not hot yet, so I won't really know. So yeah, I'm kind of bothered by how low the fluid is in this thing. There aren't any leaks that I know of. The dipstick has an A with cross hatches and a B with a grid, and I'm guessing A means the fill level when cold and B when hot, but I don't know for sure. It says see service manual, which of course I don't have. Anyway, I'll check it a couple more times just to really be sure, but I believe it's just the REM on remove. That's how high it was when the engine was cold at idle in park. We're trying to bring this thing up to 190 Fahrenheit, and it shows 177 degrees Fahrenheit on the pan. That's 81 degrees Celsius. Now, I had checked the dipstick several times and noticed that when it was cold it was down to here, and you know, I checked several times and I started the car and it started to rise. I took it for a drive because I was idling for half an hour and the bottom of the pan was still only like 135 Fahrenheit and the spec is like 190, so or it's about 190. So anyway, so I took it for a drive and now it's up to here. So it rose from here to there, cold to hot. So when I hear people talk about these are the hash marks, fill it to there when it's cold and it should come up to there when it's hot, I don't understand that, because this one changed that distance from cold to hot. I did see one fellow who followed the directions I hear people talk about, fill it to the bottom of A when it's cold, and he took it for a drive and he said my transmission started shifting weird, and I took this out, and while it was running, fluid poured out the hole. So it was far above B. So I'm really not sure if that A is for the cold range and B is for the hot range. So what I'm gonna do is drain this, refill it cold up to there, and then take it for a ride. Okay, so before I pull that pan down, I was tempted to just go for it. That's my usual mode of operation. But I thought I'd try and suck some of the fluid out to just minimize the catastrophe if things got messy. And so, can't believe how easy it is. I'm not used to pumping and vacuuming and whatever transmission fluid. I'm used to doing this with gear oil, which is very thick and doesn't really come up very well. Watch this. 750 mils, like that. And there's an air bubble that comes up, and if I time it, when the air bubble comes, I don't burn myself on that cat. My safety glasses on. I don't even spill a drip. it's great. So now I'm just pumping it into a spare container here, and that's what I'm gonna do to minimize the amount that I have to deal with when I take the pan down. Okay, well, I'll be doing that a few times. Generally, things don't go this smoothly for me. I use that manual vacuum pump. 7 extractions of that canister full is about 3.5 liters. So it's about a 500 ml extraction. And couldn't get any more out of the drain, so hopefully the pan won't have too much in it. It'll still have a couple liters probably. So I've got all the bolts out except the last couple. And what's nice, this is the first time I've ever done a job like this, the pan is loose and nothing's spilling out over the pan. It's not raining in my face. How sweet is that? Now let's not spill this on my face, keeping it level. Good. As soon as I broke the seal from the filter and allowed fluid or air to get up in there, there was another liter or two that dropped out. So the pan is now fairly full. And you can see the odd drip is on the floor. So I'm very, very happy about how this worked out so far. But it's not over, you know, that could be a catastrophe yet. We'll see. Okay, so I just shut the camera off. And when I was saying it could still be a catastrophe yet, literally when I hit the button after saying the word yet, the filter fell out and spilled on the floor. But anyway, still, that's only 1/10 of the oil that I have usually had when I'm doing a transmission change, set or fluid change. So anyway, I'll sprinkle sawdust and we'll be all good again. Well, folks, there is a shame that's covered over the project. I was really hoping this would be the first transmission fluid swap ever that didn't spill. But anyway, no big deal. I caught it all with sawdust. We're good. Look, there's not a lot to see up there. I did take a rag and wiped around the edge. Certainly you want to make sure the inner edge from the gasket into the transmission is very clean. And on the outer half, there's some corrosion that's going to be on the aluminum housing, but you can't do anything about it. Don't take sandpaper and like mess around with that because you have a chance to move like abrasive particles in and splash up in this area. So there's just no need to do that unless the corrosion is so bad that the gasket won't seal. Just wipe it clean, leave it alone. I would not use brake cleaner or anything around there. There's no need to do that. And so there's nothing more to talk about here. Oh, some people have said that they broke this, this cap off. This is the dipstick cap. And all that's left is the threads. Well, if that happens to you, you can take the pan off. You should be able to see the threads in there and stick an easy out from this angle up and screw it out. So that shouldn't be too big of a deal. If I bring you over here, I'll show you the pan itself. You know, fortunately, there was no debris in the bottom of the pan. I haven't taken the filter out yet, but anyway, I hope it's all good. Here's the magnet. It was located in this area, right around that little star pattern. And it had a little bit of metal mud on it, but nothing at all that would represent a problem for 100,000 plus kilometers. And so anyway, one thing I'll say about the magnets though is they're stuck to the pan, and when they come away, you have to pull them pretty hard to get them off of there. Make sure you don't drop a magnet ever. They're very fragile, and once they crack, they won't, you can't stick them back together again. You got to get a new one. So they're not expensive, but just make sure you don't drop that. So I've taken a rag and I've wiped off all this surface and this right here. Got all the debris off that I can. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wash the whole thing down with brake cleaner. I also took the gasket and wiped it down all the way. It's a reusable gasket from Ford. Even though the kit came with the new gasket, it's purely a rubber gasket. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to reuse the factory original. It wasn't leaking before, and they're meant to be reused. So unless there's a problem, put same one back on. I do want to point out something interesting. Here's the filter, and it sits in the pan like this, I assume. And yeah, and the filter has 4 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see 4 little tiny wear marks, actually 3. That one barely has any wear on it. And so that demonstrates that the pan actually holds the filter up in place. You know, when I put the new filter in, first thing I'm going to do is clean out the hole that filter pipe goes up into, check to make sure, and I can see right in my hand that the orange O-ring is on the filter I've removed, because sometimes the O-ring stays up in the transmission, and then when you go to put your new filter on with the new O-ring, it won't fit, and you won't be able to bolt your pan up, or the O-ring could get cocked sideways in there and cause all kinds of trouble. So always make sure that the O-ring comes out with your old filter, and when you put your new filter in, put it up inside of a dry pipe, because if you put it up inside of a lubricated pipe, it'll do what mine did and slide down and maybe fall off before you can get the pan in place. So those are a couple of quick updates. The next thing I'll show you is compare your old to your new. You gotta make sure the parts you're putting in are the same ones you're taking out. And that looks pretty good to me, same shape. These tubes can come in slightly different lengths depending on which transmission you have. So just make sure that you look it over carefully to make sure your new filter is going to fit. Okay, so I'm gonna wash that off, shove this filter up in place, put the gasket back on there, start bolting it back up. Okay, my YouTube friends, well, I'll give you a quick update. I kind of had some things in my hands and had to do it quick. I put the filter up, and there are 4 notches on the top part of the filter that contacts the valve body. You want to make sure those notches align into something there that prevents the filter from rotating. So it'll be obvious when you put it in and you put the filter square with the sides of the housing, they do fit into a groove. So just take note of that. So you put the filter in, and then you're going to put your gasket in and your pan on and put your bolts in. Now I anti-seized them all. I happen to have this high temp copper anti-seize, which you don't need high temp stuff for this, but every bolt I put back in, I always anti-seize so that it comes out when you want it 2 years down the road. So I anti-seized all the bolts, and basically I held it up like this, threaded one bolt in one side, threaded one bolt in the other side, and then let my shoulders relax because they were on fire from holding all this stuff up. So then I went around and in a star pattern, like crisscross pattern, torqued all the bolts. Now the final torque is, I think, 96 inch-pounds, 8 foot-pounds. And I started at 60, then I went around at 80, and then I went around at 96. And so when you do it that way, you prevent the gasket from bunching up in any one place and possibly kinking. Pretty unlikely that could happen, but that's how all gaskets are torqued down. So the next thing we're going to do is use that same vacuum extractor pump and extract new fluid from the bottle, and I'm going to pump it up into the hole. And I'm going to do that. There were 3.5 liters that I was able to vacuum out of here, but when I took this down and emptied the residue into a bucket, there were a full 5 liters that were in the bucket. Now the fluid was hot, so I'm going to put in about 4 liters and see how it looks when it's running. So I'll be back at you. All right, good, nothing. So we take our vacuum extractor here, and I draw in a full load of this. It really does help to have a helper to hold the 1 liter bottles so they don't don't spill. And then once we got our yeah, go ahead. We've been kind of, it's easiest to vacuum out of a full bottle. So you can't completely empty a bottle easily with this vacuum extractor. So we basically transfer partial bottles to make another full one and suck it out of there. So once I get this full and ready to go, I slide my hose up over there and I slide it down into the dipstick hole, and then I pump the canister empty. All right. And I slowly bring the hose out so that I don't drip. And then I repeat. Okay, we put 4 liters in. I took 5.5 out, but it was 5.5 hot liters. And it was in the middle of the range when it was hot with the original fluid. So anyway, I took 5.5 liters out, but I put 4 back in, took it for a ride to heat it all up. Now 80 degrees Celsius on the bottom of the pan, 170, 187, 184, 186. So the internals would obviously be hotter than the external. So I'm now going to check for the level when it's hot. For sure, I'm putting my glove on. You know that's even the exhaust wrap tape is hot because when I wipe my oily glove on the heat tape, it smokes. To get it up there, I take these pliers, slide it up like that, rotate it, and drop it down. So we're not even on the dipstick, so we need to put at least another liter in and then we'll see. Okay, so I've checked this and added fluid a dozen times in little increments to bring it up. And it's probably hard to see, but there's A cross-hatching and B cross-hatching. Before I drained any fluid, it was in the middle of B, and now it's back to the middle of B. Running, hot, been circulating, purged all the air. So it's the exact same level as what it was. I don't know what A and B mean, but I can guarantee you A does not mean fill it here when it's cold, because if you fill it in anywhere in the A range when it's cold, it's going to overflow when it's hot. And with any transmission filter replacement, you should always check your old filter to see if there's anything of interest in there. Hopefully all you find is nothing. So let's take this one apart. So this is the filtered side. This is the side that sucks up, so I would not expect to see anything here or here. But on this side, if there was anything, this is where it would be picked up. So there's there's a little tiny fleck there and a couple of little flecks here. And a very small amount of debris in there. But nothing that causes me any concern, so that's great news. I changed the filter and fluid in a Tahoe once, Chevy Tahoe, and when I took this apart, I found a bunch of, not filings, but chunks of bearing. And before and after I did the filter change, it shifted beautifully. And I took the filter to a transmission shop and I asked an expert mechanic, I said, is it possible these filings and chunks and whatnot were part of the assembly process, and the first 2 seconds the transmission was running, all that stuff passed through the filter and got collected, and it's just been sitting there for 10 years? And he said, how's the transmission shift? I said, shift's great. And he said, not for long. And within 4,000 kilometers, the transmission had to be fully rebuilt. So anyway, it's always a good idea to check the filter to make sure you understand the status of your transmission, and it will certainly be foreshadowing if you see a bunch of metal parts in there. Little tip here, when I first took it out, I was very tender on the throttle the whole way through, all the shifting for several minutes, because there's air in the system, and once I noticed when it shifted from second to third, it shifted and then the RPMs went up really, even with like 5% throttle press, the RPM shot up. It jumped by 1,000. Instead of going down, they shot up, and I think that's probably because there was an oil pressure in some clutches and they slipped for a second, and if I'd been hard on the throttle, it, you know, could have accelerated wear. So your first trip out, you want to go easy. All right, I'm gonna put another liter in and we'll recheck. That's all we're doing for today. Good luck with your do-it-yourself projects. If you like my videos, please subscribe.